All right, so here we are for, I believe, the fifth week of the weekly sonneteer. And again, just as a reminder, uh, this focus on the sonnet. I mean, there are other forms of poetry out there, and so in one sense, these weekly talks have kind of a narrow focus. The sonnet, this little 14 line segment with 10 syllables per line in an iambic pentameter, which again, iambic pentameter is just, it's five iambs put together. And an iamb is two syllables that sound basically like this, da-da, right? And so a line of iambic pentameter might go da-da, 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 da-da. That's five iambs, five two-syllable increments put together, right? And so, for example, lines of iambic pentameter might be coming from one of my favorite poems, "Acquainted with the Rain," which I'll talk about later. But I have been one acquainted with the night. It's acquainted with the night. So this pattern da 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 is just it's kind of like if you emphasize it too much it sounds silly, but if you just say I have been one acquainted with the night, right, then it just rolls off your tongue, but there's actually a pattern there, and so that's a sonnet for you. And again, it's just this limited. There's a whole big world of poetry out there, but I like to focus on the sonnet one because it's probably is the most popular form of poetry ever created, and it still gets regularly used. And so it's kind of a way of spanning, you know, a lot of the reach of poetry, because you could go way back to Shakespeare and Petrarch, the Italian guy before him. We've talked about you had the two forms of sonnet, Italian and Shakespearean, and then you bring it all the way up to the present. And it's one of those that even though there are other kinds of poetry out there, and even though in our contemporary age, and for the past 100 years or so, probably most poets have been obsessed with this writing free verse, which basically is like, you throw away rhyme, you throw away meter, which is kind of this structured flow of a line of poetry, i.e., with like iambic pentameter. You throw those things away, and you try and express yourself with words, with trying to not be structured, which really is impossible. I mean, as hard as you try, you still fall into some kind of structure. You're trying to throw away structure. Some people writing poetry today are actually just writing paragraphs, and they call it a poem. And I'm like, it. I mean, you can call it whatever you want it, but does that make it what you just called it, right? Because if you're just writing a paragraph, well, just go ahead and call it prose, But you have people writing paragraphs, say, who call it a poem. And so the idea with a lot of contemporary poetry is we're trying to get rid of all the structures, all the things that people traditionally call poetry. Let's get rid of these. Um, and I guess that works, But there are also many people today, and really, who are like, "Oh, we want to get back to this more traditional form of poetry." And there might be any number of reasons for wanting to get back to writing in a more traditional way. Poetry that rhymes, poetry that has meters, and that has meter. And the classic, the most in-your-face example of that is the sonnet, because not only do you have the rhyme, the specific meter it has to be written into, but you've got to do it in 14 lines with 10 syllables a line, right? This all takes, it reminds me too, so there's this famous 20th century Russian poet named Anna Akhmatova. And Anna, Anna Akhmatova was the celebrity poet of Russia in the 20th century. She's certainly today, she's the most admired Russian poet probably outside of Russia. Um, and she lived through the Stalin era when Joseph Stalin was in charge of Russia, and he was going around among the millions of other people that he killed off. He killed a lot of the artists and writers and stuff because he was afraid of them, because he realized they could influence the people against him, right? But there were a handful of artists and writers who were so well known, who were so popular, that Stalin was like afraid to kill them. And Anna Akhmatova was one of these. Just like, I can't kill this person because I'll have an uprising if I kill them. I mean, Anna Akhmatova was a celebrity. I heard one person say that she was as well known for the portraits that other people painted of her because people just found her very physically attractive. So she was as famous for the portraits people painted of her as she was famous for her own poetry, which was like a household thing. I mean, everybody in Russia, yeah, that's a slight exaggeration, but they could quote Anna Akhmatova's poems. So the nation was just obsessed with her, along with some of its other writers. And so Stalin was like, I can't kill this person. So how do I control her? The ones that he couldn't kill because they were too popular, he was like, how can I control them? And with Anna Akhmatova, she had a grown son. And so, I believe he was in his teens, 20s maybe. And so one night, Stalin just sent some of his secret police, his KGB, I don't know if the KGB was around him, but he sent some of his secret police into a party, and they grabbed Anna Akhmatova's son, and they threw him into a paddy wagon, police vehicle, and rode off with him. And they just kept him for several years. And they wouldn't let Anna Akhmatova know if her son was even alive. They were like, he might be alive. He's probably alive. Why don't you just behave? You don't write anything against Stalin, anything to get anybody riled up, and your son will probably be okay. But part of keeping her on her toes was not letting her know if her son was even alive. And so she spent years waiting in long lines outside of various prisons trying to find out if her son was even alive. And constantly worried herself about, whether they were gonna break into her house in the middle of the night, police knock on her door and carry her off and execute her, right? And so in the midst of all this craziness, why am I telling this story? In the midst of all this craziness, Anna Akhmatova, living in the century too, where everybody was trying to express themselves freely with their poetry, throw away all the restrictions, the rhyme and the meter. Anna was famous and stood out during this time period for her poetry, which was like super structured, like over the top structured with the meter and rhyme and stuff. And nobody else was doing that at the time, hardly. They were all experimenting, right? But she was like, no, I'm going as traditional as possible. Now, you don't usually get that in translation, because when you read a translation, usually with translating poets, you have to sacrifice one of two things. You either sacrifice their style to get their meaning, or you sacrifice their meaning to get their style. And so it's usually a crapshoot, And so with Anna Akhmatova, the people who do a decent job of getting her meaning never really give you a good feel for her style, right? But that said, she was super structured, super traditional. I was reading an introduction one time to a book on Akhmatova's poetry, and they were talking about it. They had a theory that maybe the reason why she was so structured in her poetry was because her life was chaos. Everything around her was nuts, I mean, she lived through World War II, and was like trying to inspire people and encourage them as her city was being destroyed by the Germans and everybody was starving to death trying to fight off a German siege. And so yeah, her life was chaos, but the one thing she could control the one thing she could structure was her poetry. And so that was the one area of her life where she could sit down and life felt orderly, life felt structured, and she could kind of push out the craziness around her and write, and structure something in her life, have something be orderly. Now, she also wrote some very bleak poetry because while it may have been structured, it was also she wrote a lot about what was happening around her, and so it's tough reading Akhmatova, because it's her poetry is so intense because it's all about her personal suffering and all about the suffering of the people around her. Under Stalin during World War II with the invasion, with the German invasion, and so it's pretty intense thematically, but it's very structured, the form of it, because I really like that interpretation. It was like, with the craziness of the world around her, she was like, I need some structure. Here it is. And maybe that's why a lot of people across gender and cultural, racial boundaries still write in the sonnet form today. And it's even becoming more popular nowadays. There's sonnet contests out there which draw hundreds and hundreds of submissions from like all walks of life. Becoming more popular because, there's always craziness in the world, right? And what with COVID and the racial strife, that we've had the last several years that kind of paralleled COVID and all that, right? And political polarization and things. And there's a lot of things out there to stress you out, right? And so maybe that's one reason that the sonnet's, like, conceivably one of the most structured of poetical forms is making a comeback. All right, so I've gone into all that. I would love to throw an Akhmatova poem at you, even in translation, but I can't. I've never come across a sonnet by her. It's interesting, as structured as she liked writing her poetry, I haven't been able to find any sonnets by her in translation. So I'm bringing another sonnet by another poet to you. This one is by another woman who saw some strife in her life. Her name was Gwendolyn Brooks. And Gwendolyn Brooks died in 2000 and lived most of the 20th century. I think she was born in like the 1920s. And Gwendolyn Brooks is probably the most well-known, the most famous black female poet that we have, okay? So she's been super inspiring, especially to black female poets who have followed after her. But she is the most prominent name among black female poets, and so I'm going to read one of her poems to you today. One of her sonnets. This particular sonnet is called the Sonnet Ballad. And as usual, it's in a link there at the bottom. And I want to preface this by a ballad. So a ballad is a poem usually with multiple stanzas, multiple sections, which tells a story. And frequently the ballad, telling its story, it makes use of some repetition throughout. And it's frequently told in a way of like an older person passing down a story to a younger person. Okay, this doesn't fit that last definition, but when I think of ballads, the first thing that always comes to mind is Bob Dylan's song, Shelter from the Storm. Is it Shelter from the Storm or Shelter in the Storm? That's important. Let me... Shelter from the Storm. So Bob Dylan's song, Shelter from the Storm. If you want just a classic, kind of a more modern ballad, but it's got a classic, feel to it, Shelter from the Storm is amazing, But again, it's a poem that usually in multiple stanzas, not like a sonnet, which has one or two stanzas at the most, but a poem that tells a story and often makes use of repetition, and it often gives you this feeling of like an older person passing something down to a younger generation, right? It's kind of a generational passing down. And so let me read the poem to you. And again, you come follow the link at the bottom there. The Sonnet Ballad by Gwendolyn Brooks. She lived from 1970 to 2000. It says there in the link. Oh, mother, mother, where is happiness? They took my lover's tallness off to war, left me lamenting. Now I cannot guess what I can use an empty heart cup for. He won't be coming back here anymore. Someday the war will end, but oh, I knew when he went walking grandly out that door that my sweet love would have to be untrue, would have to court coquettish death, whose impudent and strange possessive arms and beauty of a sort can make a hard man hesitate and change, and he will be the one to stammer, yes. Oh, mother, mother, where is happiness? I'll read it again. The Sonnet Ballad by Gwendolyn Brooks. Oh, mother, mother, where is happiness? They took my lover's tallness off to war, left me lamenting. Now I cannot guess what I can use an empty heart cup for. He won't be coming back here anymore. Someday the war will end, but oh, I knew when he went walking grandly out that door that my sweet love would have to be untrue. Would have to court coquettish death, whose impudent and strange possessive arms and beauty of a sort can make a hard man hesitate and change, and he will be the one to stammer, yes. Oh, mother, mother, where is happiness? Okay, let's talk about this poem. So first, you've got this obvious repetition going on at several points, right? The first and last lines are the exact same. Oh, mother, mother, where is happiness? Right? So this girl's talking to her mom, and she's like, I was happy. Happiness is gone now. Where can I find happiness, right? It's interesting. There is this kind of structure or point of sonnets called a sonnet crown. And a sonnet crown has multiple sonnets together. So that if you're like, oh, I can't fit all my ideas into this little sonnet, well, write multiple sonnets, you know? And then you can get out of the trap of not feeling like you have enough space to say what you want to say. You can write multiple sonnets in a row. Shakespeare had the most famous one. But a sonnet crown is multiple sonnets in a row where, for example, the last line of the sonnet is always the first line of the next sonnet. And so you move along with this. Again, the last line always being the first line of the next one, right? But she kind of has that feeling going on here, Gwendolyn does, with the first and last lines being the same. Oh, mother, mother, where is happiness? Then we go on, still talking just about the style of it. Took my lover's tallness off to war. My lover's tallness. She doesn't say my tall lover, she say my lover's tallness, you know? And so it's kind of like one of the things she most loved about her husband maybe was he was tall, and so they took my lover's tallness off to war. This tall, handsome guy I was married to, I felt so warm and happy with how, you know, his tallness. They took my lover's tallness off to war. It's just an interesting poetic way of just changing out that wording. Not my tall lover, but my lover's tallness. Left me lamenting, right? Left me all sad and depressed, right? I thought I was going to talk about this stylistically and then go back and hit other elements, but I'll just tell everything as I go, right? Left me lamenting, left me weeping, right? Now I cannot guess what I can use an empty heart cup for. My heart cup is empty now. What do I use it for? What do I use my heart for anymore, right? Great metaphor there. The heart is a cup, right? He won't be coming back here anymore. My lover's not going to come back, I know it. He's never going to return. Someday the war will end, but oh, I knew when he went walking grandly out that door that my sweet love would have to be untrue. The war may end. Yeah, the war will end one day, and her lover may survive. He may come home, but his heart doesn't belong to her anymore. You know, he went marching out the door feeling like, I'm going to be a soldier, it's glorious, I'm going to go do glorious things, went walking grandly out that door, and he's not true to his wife anymore. He's found another lover. His lover now is war. Um, and some of us may find that hard to understand in modern days because we've been told a lot how evil war is, and it's awful. But especially in past times, you know, when war wasn't quite as impersonal, you just push a button, drop a bomb, and blow everybody up, you know. But people even fought hand to hand and stuff. War was not seen as quite as, I mean, people felt a little more romantic about war. Like, we're going to go do something great, you know? We're going to go pit our strength against some other person's strength, right? We're going to conquer. And so war here is kind of like a woman, you know, that's like attracting this man away from his wife, you know? And so you have this break. You have this Italian sonnet break, Petrarchan sonnet break. They're the same thing. You have the first 8 lines building up to this. Her lover's gone off to war. He may come back one day, but his heart's not going to be with her anymore if he does. Right? She's like, what do I use my empty heart cup for now that my lover is gone? Right? So those first 8 lines are that first segment of your Italian sonnet, and then we go into the next 6 lines. That my sweet love would have to be untrue. She does this great switch over from the first section, the 8 lines, to the second section, the 6 lines, by basically repeating herself again. The last line of section 8, that my sweet love would have to be untrue. First line of the next section would have to be untrue. So it's really cool the way she works that repetition in there to kind of move from the first part to the second part of her Italian sonnet. Would have to court coquettish death, whose impudent and strange possessive arms and beauty of a sort can make a hard man hesitate and change. Coquettish is kind of like a coquette is a flirtatious woman, okay? So coquettish death. Death is this flirty woman, you know, who is like flirting with this lady's husband, right? Would have to court. If you court someone, you're trying to get them into a romantic relationship with you. You bring them flowers and chocolates and what, right? And so that he's not married to her anymore. He's out there courting coquettish death, who's impudent. Impudent is like bold. You don't care. You know you're being bad, but you just don't care. And so this woman, death, this coquettish girl, she doesn't care that she's doing wrong, that she's stealing somebody else's husband. She's impudent about it, right? Who's impudent and strange, possessive arms. Death, you know, what a strange woman, right? With her possessive arms. She's like, come here, give me more, give me more. You know, she wants to take everybody she can, right? She's not happy with just one man. She wants lots of men to come fight so that she can possess them. Whose impudent and strange possessive arms and beauty of a sort. Okay, maybe there is something beautiful about death and about war, but it's twisted, right? And so really we've got 2 metaphors for this new lover. War, you can call her war, or you can call her death. She's kind of both, war and death, you know? It's personifying. Personifying is when you give human characteristics to something that's not human. So we're giving human characteristics to death, to war. We're making it this attractive woman who's stealing this woman's husband, right? Possessive arms and beauty of a sort, yes, in ways death and war can seem beautiful, can make a hard man hesitate and change. And he will be the one to stammer yes. So it's like even a man who is determined to just be a faithful husband, right? To love his first lover Death, war with her coquettish arms can even make a determined man hesitate and be like, well, she is attractive. Maybe I'll go after her. And then his heart changes. And he will be the one to stammer, yes. You know, he's trying to resist, but he's like, yes, yes, I'll go. I'll be with you. You know, and then he's been untrue to his first lover, to his first wife. And then this woman who's just in pain, you know, at the end she says it again, oh mother, mother, where is happiness? Right? One last little note just to point it out in case you didn't notice. Well, this is an iambic pentameter. Oh mother, mother, where is happiness? They took my love versus tallness off to war. And that's the whole way through, right? And then you've got this, again, too, you've got a very formal rhyme scheme. Ness, guess, war, for, more, door, new, true, court, sort, strange, change, yes, ness. And so formal rhyme scheme, iambic pentameter, you've got, this is a very traditional sonnet, but I like the way it's kind of just like talking too. You know, there's a lot of breaks in this. Some sonnets, you just got this nice, even flow to most of the lines. This is all broken up, right? Going down those last four lines, possessive arms and beauty of a sort can make a hard man hesitate and change, and he will be the one to stammer, yes, oh mother, mother, where is happiness? And to me, as I read this, it's like conversational. It's like a woman talking to her mother, and she's not. It's tricky in a beautiful way because the way Gwendolyn Brooks writes it, it doesn't sound super formal. It doesn't sound super structured, even though it is. With all these little breaks, she makes it sound as if it's just some girl talking to her mom about how she misses her husband who's gone off to fight in the war, right? And so really it's masterful, this poem. You have this super structured traditional sonnet, but yet within the lines, she creates this feeling, again, like it's just some girl talking to her mom on the phone, like, oh, mom, mom, you know, unbearing her soul. All right, that's what I got for today, and I'll see you next week.